Just one sec here. There it goes. Okay, I know it's live now. What happened? Oh, there we go. All right. I think we're on now. I think everything is on. Everything is running. Okay, everybody. Welcome to this is normally where Kate would be sitting next to me. This is called Team Blaney After Dark. And I was extremely lucky to contact official tear down attorney. I don't know what's title for Shannon McMinimee,
the official NASCAR superfan / lawyer.
Well, it's funny. Like today, everything that happened today, I was thinking like, boy, I hope they have her on. I don't know what was going to happen because everything that happened, and then I hurried up and they did a podcast, and they're probably both drinking right now. They're probably both underneath a table somewhere in downtown Charlotte. Fine, they deserve it. Been watching those guys, and yourself on their podcast. They're doing the last, what was it, 5 nights, 6, 7. I want to thank you for coming on first off, and hopefully, like what was the last couple of weeks, past week or so, somebody even said to me, called me on Twitter, called me out, said, another dummy with a podcast. Yeah, I am. I'll admit that, but I'm trying to learn. I've seen the both sides of things, and today was just, to me, it was unbelievable. I mean, I would have thought they would have settled this beforehand, but it seemed like momentum was going a certain way here. And is that part of what tipped the scales maybe for them to actually go ahead and call it and negotiate with each other?
Sure. So first off, hi, Team Blaney After Dark and Team Blaney podcast. I like to think of myself as a friend of the pod, as my good friend Nicole Chipman is the person who live tweets Ryan Blaney's scanner, and how I've met these guys in the past at races and other events. So, and I am actually going to suggest that Jeff and Jordan are both furiously still working. Jeff is writing. I'm sure Jordan is working all of his sources to get as many details as possible about what today's settlement is beyond what we've kind of had trickle out so far. Why today? Going back to the Sunday before the trial started, which now seems like roughly 75 years ago, I was asked if it was possible for a case to settle during trial, and I said yes. And I identified that the potential point of settlement for this trial would be when the teams rested their case, like when they finished what their case in chief. Why? Because that was an opportunity where their story would be out and their best version of evidence would be before the jury. And both sides would have a really good sense as to the strengths of the case, how the jury was reacting to the case, and a good read on where things would go if the case continued. It just so happened to be that yesterday was the day where the plaintiffs rested their case. So that day happened. And I think that there are a couple of things that were going on during the trial that put the balance of justice and beyond. For a civil case, it is more reasonable than not, more probable than not. So 51% leaning this way. I think it was probably pretty clear that the jury had heard a strong case from the teams. NASCAR and their attorneys did a great job trying to poke holes, but it was very clear that there was a compelling through story that was well supported by documents. I think that the teams chose the theme of trust the documents on purpose, and it was a really important through line where they kept coming back to and pointing the jury back to what NASCAR executives said during the negotiations, what documents said from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 years ago. And also, I think the individual letters from team owners to Jim France, most of which we had no idea about, or knew they might have existed, but not the contents that came out during his testimony on Tuesday were really impactful, especially balanced against Jim France identifying that Joe Gibbs, Rick Hendrick, Roger Penske are some of his closest friends. And in fact, he identified that when he ran his Legends car, he ran it out of Joe Gibbs' shop. So I think it was the culmination of that information, as well as having had over a week and a half in front of the jury, in a sense, to read their body language and get a clear idea of where things were going. Clearly, both sides hired very good, experienced legal teams. They had trial consultants. I'm sure they were getting feedback from them on how they were perceiving the case to have been going. I think that all of those things came into play. A lot of folks have asked me, do I think Johnny Morris's letter from last night played a role? Obviously, we don't know, but I remember 3-4 weeks ago when the text messages got released and there was talk about, somebody better call and apologize to Richard Childress, or there was an apology call's already been made. I said, somebody better be apologizing to Johnny Morris. And they're like, wait, was NASCAR trashing him in text messages too? And I'm like, no one specifically called him out by name, but I think that they're strongly underestimating his relationship with Richard Childress and the fan base that is within NASCAR that supports Bass Pro Shops and other things, how they would internalize those comments aimed at Richard Childress towards them. And also, Bass Pro Shops sponsors multiple different teams in multiple different series and regularly is a race sponsor. I don't think you could think of a more important sponsor or more well-known sponsor who has a longer loyalty record than maybe Coca-Cola, mm-hmm. that could have had that much of an impact in saying, whoa, time out, big problems here. So I think that has the potential to have been part of the impact. I also think that Roger Penske and Rick Hendrick were still on the witness list and were anticipated to have to be called either today or tomorrow. Yeah. And I really don't think that was going to be something that would go well. And here, they never wanted to testify, mm-hmm. right? They never wanted to testify. And the only reason they agreed to testify is Jim France called them or reached out to them, personally asked them to testify. And they would have had a really hard examination trying to explain why they were testifying, that they're okay with this system now, in light of these very passionate personal letters that were now in evidence. So I think it was those things played a big factor. All of those things, to include not putting your best friends on the stand and having them have to go through intense scrutiny about why they're testifying today. Is it just because of your friendship when you said this, when you wrote this letter? So I think all of those things came to play.
That's what I was going to ask you, because, okay, so 2311 and Front Row are bring this suit. And deep down, aren't some of the other teams hoping that they win the suit, even though they're not included in it, even though they're not going to be, doesn't what happened today, the settlement that they end up agreeing upon, help all the other teams?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
To work?
Absolutely, without a doubt. So ultimately, the settlement agreement itself, confidential. However, the changes to the relationship between teams and NASCAR will be more public than how much attorney's fees they're getting or how much damages did they get. Those elements associated with what that relationship looks like going forward, we already have a sense of what those will be. They talked about it a bit in the press conference. Those have to be explained to the other team owners, and everyone's going to have to sign new agreements. But we do know that the teams, both through the Race Team Alliance at the start, then through the team negotiating committee, and then as individual owners, had 4 pillars, so 4 principles of what they wanted to get out of the last round of charter negotiations that weren't set in stone, in the sense of they weren't going to ask for the same amount of money over and over again, but getting more revenue from the media deal was one of those pillars. But the biggest things that they were looking for were permanent charters, a say in governance, because there had been a 3 strikes veto provision related to changes under the 2016 charter agreement that had gone away. A share of revenue that comes in from the joint use of IP moving forward. So, and it sounds like they're going to get a third of that moving forward. And evergreen charters, IP. This is where my brain begins to glitch out. More revenue, say in ownership. There we go. And that ownership case. So they did get every element of those 4 pillars, right? So they already had increased revenue money under the charter agreement. Under the settlement agreement, there's going to be periodic review of the financial relationship between the teams and NASCAR every time there's a new media rights deal. There's going to be a 5 strikes sort of veto system in place where the owners participate in decision-making that could impact the costs for the teams. There's going to be a 1/3 percentage of money that comes from new deals. Sounds like there's a gambling deal in the pipeline that came up a lot in trial, where use of both NASCAR and team IP will generate revenue, and that will come back and they'll get a 1/3. And then the evergreen charters. And they also got something else. They're going to get a percentage of international revenue, which the teams have never gotten a percentage of that before. So all teams will benefit for that. Do I think any other group of teams were in a position to raise this case? That would have been really hard, right? Because what we heard consistently from Heather Gibbs, Richard Childress, and was probably true for a lot of other owners, they don't have the ability to mount the legal costs that Michael Jordan ultimately is personally loaning the money to 23XI to finance this. And he and Curtis Polk have real world business experience in the sports ownership venue that nobody else really had, and connections and people and relationships that put them in a position to be able to look at the system and go, plus Michael Jordan's pockets, which, this is not cheap litigation. And then Bob Jenkins has always viewed himself as a bit of a maverick, right? And also has his entire career, a long portion of his career has been in the franchise industry, and has the ability to see, like, I have this business that I built for myself based on a franchise model that works. And I am consistently losing money year after year after year in NASCAR. I'm willing to stand with these guys and go down this road. And that combination created some real juxtaposition in storytelling that I think is appealing to a jury. The through line through all of this and all of the testimony was family business. Every single person who testified, except for the experts, testified about how this ties back to love of sport and family, whether it's Michael Jordan going to Talladega with his dad, Denny Hamlin talking about his parents and what they gave up to get him into racing, Heather Gibbs talking about the Gibbs family story, Richard Childress, who I'm really glad one of the days that I was there was for Richard Childress, just because when he's like, I'm just going to take a moment and tell the jury a little bit about myself. And he just did. He's like, I've been in business for 60 years, and here's what I'm going to tell you. So I think the theme of family business came through.
That's the thing, is like what they say, how to make a small fortune in racing.
Start with a big fortune.
And what the arguments I try to have with people about this whole situation was this, and that is, yes, on Saturday night, your local dirt track or your local asphalt circle track somewhere, a lot of guys spending a lot of their own money, or found a friend or two or helping them out, and they're racing for fun, and the fans are having a good time watching that. NASCAR isn't that anymore. It may have started that way, right, way in the beginning, but it's not that anymore. And to own a team and to operate the program and to make money, it has to be run differently. It can't be run like the little family, me and my cousin and my brother who's going to help me work on the car. And on Saturday night, hopefully it'll run right. And maybe we'll finish quite well, and maybe we won't. And, it's just not like that at this level now. And I think Michael Jordan especially, bringing in, having that kind of money to do this, he was looking at it as the business venture that it is for him and what the return on the investment was. And
Curtis
sure, they're
Polk
showing
was
some.
Curtis Polk was really looking at that. Michael loved it, and he's relying on
Right.
Curtis to tell him this is a bad idea.
That's that. There it is. You know, he definitely had somebody who understood, you know, exactly. And we talked about franchises earlier, and that's, I think, sort of what they were looking for as part of the structure, right? Is to treat the teams as more of like franchises who are part of your business, and they're making money as the ownership of the business. But the truth is most sports leagues, there is no one owner collecting all the money and sitting there and maybe doling it out a little bit here and there. All those franchises are run in a manner that they're making the money for the league, and you know, they are a good proportion of the ownership. So I think I called it a redistribution of the pie, basically, is what this came down to, right? I mean,
I'm going to say that this case could have ended in two ways. It could have gone to the jury, and we would have watched the most spectacular divorce ever, regardless of how it went. I think we got a marriage out of this. Like, I think the settlement agreement became the prenuptial agreement that gives us a marriage, right? One of the things that folks have to, like, yes, this will make charters cost more. However, it's a permanent asset now. You have equity in owning this charter. It can't get taken away from you. You own this. Or if you're looking to get into the sport, you can get investors to back you because there is something of value that you're going after. You don't have to put your personal fortune on the line anymore because there's a tangible asset at the end of the day that you can sell to investors as get on board with me. Like somebody said, oh, a comment like, we'll never see Dale Jr. buy a charter now. Like, well, actually, I don't think we would have seen Dale Jr. or Kelly Earnhardt Miller, who's a brilliant businesswoman, risk the family fortune on buying a charter and put all of their personal money into buying a charter. But now they're in a position where if it looks like going cup racing is something they want to do, they can find investors or an investment group who wants to back them in purchasing a charter because that has tangible equity value that will make it more likely to get long-term investment into the sport instead of the churn of ownership we've seen really in the last 20 years where you owned the physical things, but you had nothing tangible that could last beyond, well, the current charter agreement, the prior charter agreement, and then before that, what you had in your shop.
I found it interesting. Somebody had already made this statement. Now with, let's say I own a team on front row, and I'm going to be getting more revenue coming my direction from the top. Am I able now to operate my team where I'm not as dependent on getting a driver with his own sponsorship coming in?
Yeah, I definitely think we might go back to more of the days where drivers having to have money to get into a seat may become less of a thing. Because again, also not just getting more money from a NASCAR, which is going to happen because of the terms of the deal with regards to the increased profits, increased potential from new business, international money, all of that. But when you have something that is an equity interest, you can go out and get financing for that where you're not personally on the hook for it. And therefore you are less dependent on having either drivers who have family connections to bring in a big sponsor or have existing sponsors who are willing to back them up. I think it does give us the potential to see more of the days when we see a driver work their way up on talent who doesn't come with sponsorship money in hand, because it's a much more stable business model. Not just the amount of money that the teams will get from NASCAR, but also the ability to have a tangible thing for them to go get financing to back them up in making moves. And also the ability to promise sponsors, I'm still going to be here in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, because we're not taking a multi-million-dollar hit every year. Now, do I think that this is going to make Bob Jenkins less frugal? No. That man's still going to be buying his own ice. That's for sure. But maybe we'll see him be in a position where he can put some more money into focusing on speed as opposed to running a business in a way that allows him to keep in business every year, even though he's losing money.
Yeah, I was like, and this would have been a question if they would have kept going here, was I noticed like, okay, so NASCAR is starting to give their their side of things in the next couple of days was supposed to be happening. And they were going to give statistics. Were all their statistics including all the series, all 3 series? Because I believe during the front row stuff early on, they were told that they weren't allowed to show the truck series stuff, as far as like statistics.
So let me break this into 3 groups because it's important to understand what the parties had to give up and what the teams not parties had to give up. Front row 2311 had to give up their financials generally. NASCAR had to give up their financials generally, to include information about the overall NASCAR profit and loss information, the distributions to the France family, all of that. So that, like, do I think that I ever foresaw the day where NASCAR fans would learn like the details of the fact that there's a France family trust board that oversees the NASCAR board? No. So what the whole set of circumstances were that the parties had to give up their financial information. Jim France was a defendant, so he had to give some personal financial information, but they all agreed that the personal information about the businesses that the owners and the owners had that were outside of NASCAR and personal finances for everybody but Jim France at NASCAR were not relevant to the issue at hand. And then the teams were required to provide data to a lovely CPA that was a witness for all of 25 minutes to anonymize their profit and loss information. And for that was just Cup information. So, and they had to do a good faith effort to provide information specific to Cup, recognizing that if you're running your Xfinity or truck operation out of the same shop, it's going to be a percentage. So I think at the end of the day, it was clear that the biggest pot of money for NASCAR comes from the Cup Series, for sure. Xfinity has stabilized itself. Well, O'Reilly Auto Parts has now stabilized itself with having one consistent network partner in the CW. And trucks, and I think I'm actually going to, Steve Phelps described the fan groups he went through the different things that NASCAR owns, and he identified that trucks were unique because they were probably the venue that had the most loyal fans, but the least casual fans, which I just thought was an interesting viewpoint from his perspective. And so ultimately, this deal applies to Cup ownership. Does it trickle down into the other series? Yes, because certainly the majority it's just going to put more money into the system, and it's going to reinvigorate the pipeline. And NASCAR, I truly believe that the NASCAR executives and the France family are committed to growing NASCAR, and spoke of the opportunities to develop drivers, develop teams, being important to them. And I think they were sincere about that. I think the crazy thing is this was an entire group of people who genuinely cares for the sport and just were so far apart. And it took going to trial and sitting through 8 days of, at times, agonizingly painful testimony to get to the point where it was, okay, let's get this done and control our destiny. I think it's really important to know that it could have gone to the jury, and 2311 in front row could have won and had it be a Pyrrhic victory. Like, they could have gotten damages, but then never got to race again. So this is the opportunity for both sides to control their own destiny and to control the destiny of the sport instead of putting it into Judge Bell's hands. While we love Judge Bell, he was a great judge. He really was clear that if this came to him for remedies, buckle up. He was going to do some pretty drastic things. Yeah.
Now, do we know, or was anybody ever going to find out who approached who here? And I mean, has it been something over a day or two? They may have been doing it in the evenings, or did it happen just like last night? Let's get together.
I think that there have been touch points throughout since championship week, right? There was a real effort to try and solve it through championship week.
Yeah.
I think that it would have, I would assume, just based on my read of the room and Judge Bell pulling just the 2 lead attorneys back on Friday. I don't know if that was a conversation of, I'm going to tell you one last time, find a way to work this out. I guess I would just speculate that was what it might have been, because he also didn't take the court reporter back with him. Like if he was bringing them back to talk to them about a legal issue, the court reporter would have gone back with him. So I'm just going to say that might be my hunch. I think the teams have always been open to resolving this. It's just a question of what was NASCAR willing to do to get it done. And clearly, the series of events that happened over the last couple of days, I can't imagine that they didn't have serious concerns as of end of day Tuesday. I think Tuesday was a really hard day for them in court.
I don't want to speculate, but do you think that, especially after Jim France testifies, that finally he got it? He understood that he's got to budge somewhat, because they made it sound like it was like he was the one stopping everything from happening as far as negotiation. Like it almost sounds like that negotiation that was happening right before the championship was without him in the room, and then when they brought it to him, well, that's it. Nope, I'm not going to let that happen.
I don't know. I do know that during that week, Steve Phelps was handling the negotiations, and so I don't know if it was just a repeat of the charter negotiations where Steve Phelps is taking the lead, and then ultimately we also won't exactly know what the terms at that point were versus what the terms are now, right? There may have been something else that was a sticking point then that ceased to be a sticking point when you're in front of a jury and have gone through 8 days of trial. And honestly, how Jim presented was going to be really significant for NASCAR. And I was not in the courtroom for his testimony the following morning. So it sounds like he did better with regards to being a little bit more, I think likable might be the wrong word, but being able to tell a narrative to the jury so that they would have a sense as to why he made the decisions he made. And I think he did give reasoning like, hey, I thought I was upholding the principles my parents passed on to me. Yeah. But his Tuesday testimony on direct from the teams was really, really bad. I mean, it was astounding. And I kept looking at the jury and I was trying to figure out if they didn't believe him or if they were just astounded that somebody in his position didn't know these things about like how much money he makes as the NASCAR CEO. Yeah. Does Lisa have a job at NASCAR? If so, what is her job? Like those types of things. There was just his affect, there was just such a disconnect. And I truly believe that he legitimately did not know how much money he makes, what his sister's job is, if she has one, all the, like those big ticket items. I think he was telling the truth about that. And I just think it was, and I don't know if the jury thought he was telling the truth or if they were just disconcerted that he didn't know that level of, like, if you're getting paid either $3.5 or $3.8 million to be a CEO and a chairman of the board, separate from the fact that, oh, and by the way, you and your sister collectively own this entire thing anyway, that you would just know more. And I think that was really tough. And there were some really great witnesses along the way. I think honestly, the single most impactful witness might have been Heather Gibbs, and her telling the story of how Coach Gibbs reacted that day and what things were like for her and her connection to the sport, how she came into the sport, and having the background of being a very successful real estate agent. Like, I think, if anybody ever saw NASCAR driver sells house or NASCAR driver purchases house and clicked on the article, they would have seen that Heather Gibbs has been doing all of these deals for years. So her relationships go far beyond just Joe Gibbs. And I think that she was a really compelling witness. I think that, obviously Michael Jordan's Michael Jordan. That man is sharp on his feet. He's savvy. He is likable. I think Richard Childress, I think it really helped the teams to have third-party witnesses who came in and were able to give perspective that this was not just a Bob Jenkins, Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan issue. it was an issue that team owners across the board felt. And really, that's where on Tuesday, I think things kind of became so clear once we knew that there were also Rick Hendrick, Roger Penske, all these other people who'd submitted letters to, who were begging Jim France, who they consider his personal friend, to have permanent charters. Like, I think that was Tuesday was huge.
If we would have gotten to that point where those two got on the stand, cross-examination would have pretty much, right? Because they would have had to admit to those letters in the cross, and then
it would have been brutal.
Yeah.
And the obvious,
right?
it would have started with, you're only here today because your good friend asked you to testify. Isn't that correct? And it's true. Like, they were last minute additions to the witness list. And just the whole theme of trust the documents makes me think that even though we did not see them and we will never see them, that the teams had a lot more communications besides just the letters that they were going to put up with them to undermine any sort of testimony of, we're okay with how things are. I think there was universal agreement between all of the owners that they wanted this case to be resolved. I don't think anybody wanted to see the case go to trial for all of the reasons that have happened over the course of the last 3 weeks. All of those messages going public, quite literally, like, poor Richard Childress starts getting asked about things that he knows are subject to an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and just, all of this was a lot. And I don't think we're done with that one, by the way. There will be a hearing next week on the how did the NASCAR attorneys get the documents, which I think are some sort of presentation material that Bobby Hillen was using to try and get investors to purchase in to Richard Childress Racing. How that got to NASCAR's attorneys. So there's still gonna be a hearing on it, because there's some discovery stuff, right? Like, if they had this, they should have turned it over to the teams. How did they get it? All of that. So that's going to be one to watch for next week. I don't think it's going to be NASCAR Part 2, but it is certainly going to be something to see. And I think for Richard Childress, he's a big winner in all of this, because he has a partner who's wanted out, and wanted out for a while with Chartwell. And now he's going to have 2 evergreen charters and the ability to go out and get investment backers who want to be in the sport, knowing that they have permanence and equity. So I think he's a big winner here too, because he has the ability to go out.
Does he have legal? Does he have legal? For at least that part of things where they found out about an NDA. I mean,
it will depend on who gave who what and why, but I did think it was lovely that both Austin and Ty came and sat in the courtroom when he testified. They really do call him Pop Pop, by the way. Like, he was going down the stairs, and I'm like, somebody might want to go with him before you send him out to the flanks of media. And they're like, Pop Pop, wait. And I'm like, oh, they really do call him Pop Pop. That's cute. But yeah, Ty and his lovely wife Haley were there, and Austin was there. So, which was also interesting, from putting aside my lawyer hat and putting on my NASCAR fan hat. The reaction in the courtroom when Steve Phelps talked about the safety of the Gen 7 car, right? And then on cross, when he said, other than a few small hits on the track, Denny, Ty, and Austin all had visible responses, audible responses, as did the 2311, the entity team. Of course, they know about Kurt Busch. And so, like, everybody in the room was like, whoa. And so then when Jeffrey Kess was like, sir, do you know who Kurt Busch is? He's like, of course I know who Kurt Busch is. I'm like, didn't he have to retire because of concussion? So, like, those are the moments where you get to kind of see who these people are as people, not just drivers. And I think, just having them in the courtroom, it was nice to see that, just like on that personal human being level, like your grandkids came to support you because you really are serious. You want them to run this business for you.
Yeah, that was a thing I found interesting is he's trying to sell off. Well, it was not him selling off everything, but him and his partners, and I was thinking, well, what about the family business? I thought for sure that he was passing it on.
He is, and he was I think what it was before today, he was in a position where for his own ability to, move forward in the sport, he needed somebody to come in and take on a percentage of his share, and he needed replacement investors for Chartwell. Who knows if he needs to give up his share now, right? Like now that he knows he has this thing of equity value, he might get a great deal. And they were exploring, my understanding is like, does he look at purchasing a third charter again? I don't know. Yeah. But I think it definitely, definitely allows for every team from top to bottom has the ability to will get more money from NASCAR, but more importantly, has a thing of value that they can leverage to get more sponsors and investors. And that ultimately helps the sport.
They talked about, so the couple things they definitely agreed upon, we've heard about. Is there some more that we might find out about later on? I mean, I know they didn't talk about the tracks at all here in the agreement. Is there anything about?
I do that. People have asked me about that. So NASCAR's track sanctioning agreements with that exclusivity provision are completely separate from this settlement in the sense that they continue to exist and they are timed off the media rights deal and the length of the 2024 charter agreement. So those are still out there. Remember, NASCAR and what it does with its own tracks, it completely controls, right? So if NASCAR internally wants to stop paying tracks for exclusivity, it can do that at its own tracks without having to worry about it. Might they call up SMI and Marcus Smith and other tracks they don't own and talk about restructuring that because the track exclusivity, the money that we're sending for tracks for exclusivity might be something they want to keep back for other things? Sure, that will be up to them to work out with their other partners, recognizing that one of their biggest track partners is themselves. So they can take care of that side of the business in-house pretty darn easily. But I do think, a huge risk had this gone to the jury and then to Judge Bell is that the Judge Bell would have ordered NASCAR to sell its tracks. And could that have meant a spin back out of something like SMI? Yes. But we did hear from Steve Phelps that owning some of the tracks is the only thing that made running during COVID possible for a while, and also has given them greater flexibility to take the financial hits by moving, taking the risk on the street race in Chicago or going to Mexico by taking them from their own tracks has allowed for them to do things that he found to be, and I think are beneficial to NASCAR. Like apparently we learned it was very important for NASCAR to get a pure streamer partner. And they were very excited about getting Amazon on board. And they really felt like the Chicago race is what got that to happen. So I think that not going to the point where NASCAR is ordered to sell some of its own tracks is huge. Did Steve Phelps stay on the stand that they were still committed to rebuilding a short track race at Fontana? Yes, he did. Would I love to see that? Because I'm in NASCAR Siberia on the West Coast, sure. But, there's some flexibility there that they wouldn't have had if they didn't already own the tracks. So I don't know exactly how the track exclusivity works out with SMI and other partners, but they certainly can control that with their own tracks really easily.
I mean, were you surprised today that this all came down today? I mean, I know everybody like Jordan and, everybody on the social media right away was like, oh, I can't believe this. But does this happen a lot with these kind of trials where it's in the middle of the trial?
No. Did I think it could happen in this trial? Yes, only after the plaintiffs rested. I thought the teams had to put on their case and for NASCAR to see their case in its entirety before they would settle. And I also think that we had to have Jim France have his day on the stand to feel like he had said his piece. And if then he's told, still don't think the jury took that well, or you really need to settle, then he's done what he could to present why he did what he did. So I wasn't surprised. I am pleasantly surprised it was today instead of Friday going into the weekend, because that really felt like you were playing chicken with a judgment. And for the reasons we talked about before, not having to put Rick Hendrick and Roger Penske on the stand, the external pressure from one of your longest, most loyal sponsors, plus just the clock. That I can't begin to tell you how expensive that room was. I'm an attorney. I know what billable hourly rates are. I know I have a ballpark of what these attorneys are making, and there were 10 attorneys from each team at tables up front, plus others scattered in the courtroom. And that there are also paralegals and attorneys working back at offices. I don't know what the hourly rate of that room was, but we are talking tens of millions of dollars of money has gone into this litigation. And NASCAR was would have been calling another expert this morning. And as we learned from the other two experts, those guys click off at between $1,500 and $2,000 an hour. Fun fact, all three of the experts, NASCAR's two experts, the team's one expert, all work together at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. They are all friends. They are all really good friends. And they are probably taking the guy who didn't testify, Professor Murray, out for a drink to catch him, or dinner to catch him up on what he didn't get to testify to. But if you want to know if your economics degree can pay off someday, become the best in your field and be an expert witness, because that's super lucrative. So it was just an physically expensive proposition to keep all of those people in that room churning, even for 2 more days. That would have been huge amounts of money. So I understand cutting the bleeding when they did, from a perspective of, one, we still have to keep paying our team, and two, if we're taking on the costs of, if we go to the jury and we lose, we owe the teams all of their legal fees and costs. If we keep going, that number just gets bigger. So I always thought the highest potential day for settlement would be when the teams rested. The teams rested yesterday. I won't lie. I set my alarm for 5:15, it's knowing that the court, or 5:30, knowing that that's when the court day would start. I'm out on the West Coast. And as soon as I saw Jeff's alert tweet, my body shut down and I passed out and I fell asleep for a few minutes. Thank goodness my dogs wanted breakfast and made me get up, because it was just like, oh, thank goodness. Everything's going to be, if they reach an agreement they can all live with, then it's ultimately going to be okay for the sport. Because the one thing that was true is everybody who testified probably, well, no, I won't even say other than the accountant, because the accountant says he was the accountant. He is an accountant for teams in Charlotte anyway. Everybody but the experts cared deeply about NASCAR and wanted whatever not the company, the industry, and wanted whatever came of this trial to be good for the industry.
So if it would have went the full distance, the jury is only 6 people, correct? It's not
3 alternates. So in federal court, you can have the civil jury just needs to have 6 members, and it has to be unanimous. Well, you can choose for it to be less than unanimous, but almost never are people going to choose for that, because the defense is always going to want the ability to say, all I had to do was convince one person. So there were 9 jurors, because they didn't distinguish who the 3 alternates were in the courtroom at all times, but it would have gone to the 6 of them, and they would have decided violate Sherman Act or not, and they would have determined the monetary damages. What they would not have known is that whatever damages they awarded, if they chose to do so, would have been tripled by the judge, because antitrust comes with what's called treble damages, where the jury sets the damage amount and then the judge triples that as a deterrence and punishment for the conduct. So you violated antitrust law, bad you, and we want to make sure other people don't violate antitrust law in the future. So we're going to make this real painful.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the old USFL case. They won the case, and it was $1, then times 3. So they won $3 in their victory.
But they also would have gotten their attorney's fees too. So I mean, is it a real win? No, but it's better than to have spent all that money and gotten your $3 and spent whatever amounts of money you paid on this litigation.
Now, I'm older, and we were talking about this before we went on live, and I tried to equate it to a couple sports things. The USFL thing was one, and then the other one name I brought up was Kurt Flood. with free agency.
Yep.
And some people don't even know what that is, right? And what it really did was it launched the idea or concept of the individual being the show,
and having control and destiny in their career. Like my close family friends, essentially my nephew is a Major League Baseball player. He became a free agent the day before he got married last month, and that wouldn't have been possible without Curtis Flood.
Yeah, and is this somewhat, a relatable thing to what we've just seen? Aren't the teams that's doing that same type of thing they are the show, and they're just trying to get a better piece of what they believe is from their efforts, basically?
That was the consistent messaging from the team's perspective, starting with Denny Hamlin. And by the way, people ask me like, oh my God, you're a Denny Hamlin shield. I'm like, oh, my friends could tell you that I make fun of Denny Hamlin as a race car driver all the time. Yeah. I will out myself here. I'm a friend of the Blaney podcast. My driver was Dale Earnhardt Jr. I saw him win his first race in the ARCA car back in the day at Texas. That happened to be the first race I was ever at in person. My parents did. My parents sponsored a car at a local late model track in Yakima, Washington. So I grew up in the sport. I fell in love with motorsports when I was 4. So I've been a race fan my whole life. Dale Jr. was my guy. I never had a NASCAR guy. I had IndyCar guys, but I never had a NASCAR guy until Dale Jr. So passionate Dale Jr. fan. When Dale Jr. retired, I had to decide who I was going to cheer for. And ultimately, I settled on Alex Bowman and Ryan Blaney. Ironically, Ryan was living at on Dale's compound at the time.
Yes, yeah.
And so through all of this, oh my God, you're in a show. I'm like, well, actually, I'm an Alex Bowman and Ryan Blaney fan. So I don't know how that factors in, but So I really think that at the end of the day, this brings up the sport for everyone, because as Michael Jordan said, like the relationship that happened between the NBA and the Players Association during his tenure there became a partnership. And I think that if everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction and no longer feels like they're trapped in this bad business relationship, they can devote their time and energy to growth, performance, on-track product, instead of fighting over scraps and fighting with each other for sponsors. Because again, teams don't have to be so reliant on sponsorship dollars, because they own something that they have equity in that they can use for fiscal leverage and financial leverage. And the increased money will help, of course, as well.
Yeah, a lot of people so the argument for people who are watching this case from the get-go is the old school fan, is very old school, but doesn't Denny bring this sport, with this whole situation, bring it into the 21st century by doing what they did? A lot of people are saying today he's a savior of NASCAR, or the same.
I'm going to say Michael Jordan's pocketbook is the savior of NASCAR. No, I honestly think it took having Michael Jordan as a co-owner of 23XI, who has the pockets deep enough. And I said from the beginning, you can't hometown Michael Jordan in North Carolina. NASCAR's never had to litigate anything where they didn't have home court advantage. And here they are litigating against somebody who is as powerful, or potentially more powerful for them when it comes to branding, money, background, savvy, and he's been an owner of another league, so he gets it, and he has the right business people and had the relationships to bring in the very best attorneys. And I will tell you, from an attorney perspective, watching Jeffrey Kessler, the lead attorney, work was a masterclass in trial advocacy. He was just a phenomenal lawyer. All the lawyers in the courtroom were really good, but just watching him and figuring out, like, there was a moment during Steve Phelps' testimony when he asked him about NASCAR during COVID. And I was like, what is it? And then it clicked into me. Oh, he's showing us how the France family in NASCAR could adjust to a change. Mm-hmm. If they had to make a change, they absolutely are capable of making a change and surviving. They won't go bankrupt. Like, just the way he pulled that out of Steve Phelps, and then the through line where he did it yesterday with several other NASCAR witnesses was just masterful to see that happen. So, I mean, from a lawyer perspective, you rarely get to see the very best attorneys in a field go at each other with clients who have a seemingly unlimited budget. So that was just, lawyer catnip. But then from a passionate NASCAR fan perspective, seeing how all of this plays out and just the dynamics in the room and really getting an opportunity to see that, the 2311 and front row teams genuinely want what's best for the sport. Am I going to go buy Denny Hamlin gear anytime soon? No, sorry, Denny, no. Am I glad for his attorneys that they no longer have to buy cases of Tums to worry about what he's going to tweet? Yes, I'm glad for them. Those poor folks, like, snatch his phone away from him.
Just for a week or two,
right? I completely get it, because here's NASCAR putting out talking points at the end of every day, and you're like, ah! So I'm glad for him that he doesn't have to inflict emotional trauma upon his attorneys with his social media anymore.
Did you notice that too when you say about NASCAR putting out talking points? And I'm not going to name any names, but did you notice that there were some media coverage that was like one directional a little bit?
Well,
as far as like, okay, so I'm not a journalist. Okay, Adam, who's not here, could speak to this more probably, but you're supposed to show everything or show both sides, however you want to do that. And it seemed to me like, depending on what part of Twitter you were on or what part you were grabbing your information from, there were some people that were only giving you part of it. And
I might have come up with the analogy of, like, I was just befuddled because it was also amazing to watch the NASCAR journalism cadre work, right? And they literally had their phones locked in lockers for the majority of the day. They are doing this by hand, on short breaks, pumping out consistently, pumping out high quality content in a lot of cases. And to me, what was baffling is, like, they're all in the room. They're seeing what's happening. Like, this was a little, to put out talking points like NASCAR was doing that was very one-sided, is something you maybe could have gotten away with in the past, where news of the trial would only come out in the next morning's paper. And so maybe but when you have literally 20 people in the room whose job it is to go tell the story about what happened, like the Hamilton in the room where it happened, I might have used that meme a few times. Like, I can't, and then I was in the room where it happened. I'm like, if this is what you thought happened today, woo boy. So I think there was definitely, I get from his perspective why it was hard for Denny to not chime in. I by and large got to see some really high quality work from Jeff, Jordan, Bob Pockris. I mean, again, there is nothing more humorous than a story Bob Pockris wrote in 2016 or 2017 when he was at ESPN about the track exclusivity provisions suddenly pop up on the screen. When Jeff's text exchange with Denny said, "Did you have a text with Jeff Gluck?" And everybody turns and looks at him, like, just to see that core group who write about NASCAR day in, day out. Kelly and Crandall and Matt Weaver, who was living on vibes and caffeine, going back and forth with Snowball, and Snowball, Claire, and just this whole group of really high quality journalists who are cranking out really amazing content. I did think it was a little bit disingenuous to think that they were going to just take your talking points and regurgitate them, because they were there. They're in the room where it happened. So I did not use a Hamilton meme yesterday, because I did think NASCAR's talking points for yesterday were much more aligned with the testimony in the room. Maybe because it was their case, and so they knew what that was coming, and they weren't trying to minimize. They didn't have to put things in their best possible context because it was already their case. But also watching the herd of them, the courtroom was on a different floor, and you had to kind of go out and around, just watching the herd of them descend from the courtroom to get to the lockers and immediately just start banging out things. I kind of stood back each break and made sure they all got to get to their phones first. And it was so very NASCAR, like, what number are you picking for your locker? And my first day there, I just grabbed the one that was open, and then Ty Dillon happened to come into the courtroom. Like, sorry, I already took number 10. So he did come for good. There was some good jokes there, and it was just, I think by and large, the media crew did an amazing job with coverage. And I know Jennifer and Jordan are out there honing in on the details of the settlement, as is Bob. And the joke is there's clearly never a story Bob Pockrass hasn't reported on. And document dumps be damned. He will go through, because he pulled that from, at the time, the Dover track was a publicly traded company, so they had to take the track sanctioning agreement with the exclusivity provisions to their shareholders. So what sounds like a very dry document. And they had to file it with the SEC. So he got it from a Securities and Exchange Commission filing. So there is no document dump safe in the world from Bob Pockrass turning through it and finding something interesting in there.
Yeah, what was the thing in the courtroom where everybody just turned and looked at him too? There was something.
None of the NASCAR executives had ever read the entire NASCAR rule book. And Jeffrey Kessler said, well, maybe nobody ever has. And everybody turned and looked at Bob. And, obviously team competition directors have read it, but it was just such a phony moment because everybody in NASCAR knows, oh, no, he's over here. That guy, the guy who read the rule book, he's sitting over here. And also the same thing, like when they pulled up Jeff Gluck's text messages with Denny Hamlin, they're like, this text message is between you and reporter Jeff Gluck. When you're on, you don't know. Nobody tells you ahead of time your tweet's going to be put up on the screen.
Yeah, that was going to ask you. Did Jeff even know that was going to come up?
Because when the parties disclose discovery, they hand over, they brought in tech people to pull it. Let's be realistic. I don't think they were individually good. They pull the data. You don't necessarily, unless you think to call every person you've ever texted with during a time range about a topic. The other person doesn't know that their text message is within this dump, right? So people who were subpoenaed knew that whatever they turned over existed, but the people who had communicated with the parties or communicated with people who'd been subject to a subpoena had no idea. And certainly Jeff didn't have any idea.
That had to be quite a moment. I would have shrunk in my chair.
They're like, this article, and everybody looks at, and Bob was sitting immediately in front of me that day, and Kelly Crandall, then Bob, and just to watch everybody go and turn and look at Bob was hysterical.
Yeah, he deserves he puts in the work. What can you say?
It sounds like one of my neighbors is doing some yard work, so I'm going to throw on some headphones real quick.
Yeah. All righty. Well, actually, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Actually,
perfect.
If you want,
then we can.
I want to say, I think everybody will have questions at some point too, but I'm sure they catch you on Twitter.
My Twitter,
Shannon,
my Twitter account is going to go dormant to dog content until February. We're going once the Richard Childress NDA, how did this document comes out after next week's hearing. I'm going to go back to my regularly scheduled once every month picture of my dogs doing something ridiculous until February. So this year the Daytona 500 is on my birthday, so I'm hoping that one of my guys can pull it out and have a great day down in Daytona.
Yeah, well, we think we know who's going to win this year.
Well,
and of course we're not. We know who's going to win. It's time, right? It's time.
Well, I would not be sad if Ryan wins. I did perhaps break my rule of not fighting with people about dumb things on the internet when somebody made some sort of comment about Ryan giving the flag to Charlie.
Yeah.
I lost my mind. I lost my mind.
We ended up in the middle of that too, and I don't know.
I had to call Nicole and be like, I'm sorry, I'm about ready to murder your mentions because I'm going to take a tweet from you and put it in this argument because, the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation is a charity that has become very close to me and what I care about from, what they care, the brain health and the caregiving. And those have all been huge parts of my life. My late husband was a born, raised, bred Pittsburgher, and he was a stick and ball guy. But when I explained the Blaney Family Foundation's connection with UPMC and the brain and the concussion work there, he's like, of course they're working with Dr. Mickey. He's the best. So when my husband and I got married, and then when he passed away, my beloved group of friends made donations to the Blaney Foundation. And when that woman said dumb things on Twitter, I made a donation to the Blaney Foundation. So wins at Daytona, I will be a very happy person. I lost me.
Alrighty.
So I think I blipped out, but
that's all right.
Happy to finally join the pod. It has been lovely. I think I've seen you and Kate at a few events in the past, and so happy to move up from friend of pod to friend of pod.
So right on the pod. You're part of the pod. And now hopefully we don't really need any more legal stuff between now and the end of next season, but No,
I just want to see Richard Childress find out who leaked that. And then I just want to go back to talking about what the point structure will be, what the championship model will look like, and start seeing the paint schemes for next year. I will say, of the hoods behind you, I do love the cherry lime body armor.
Oh yeah.
But my personal favorite was the Iowa car, and not just because Nicole ended up in Victory Lane and brought us the corn colored. Also, that's a really entertaining thing, is when your friend ends up in Victory Lane, the security were trying to kick us out. I'm like, I'm sorry, our friend's down there and she has the car keys. We're stuck.
She's busy getting things like that, right?
Right. I'm like, and of course it was like the Blaney family reunion. So they're like, okay, well, I guess you can wait for her. So those are my two favorite Ryan Blaney paint schemes. And then I loved the matte black last year. Where Advanced Auto Parts finally got their love in a winning paint scheme.
Yeah, those guys, they're great over there. I actually won their giveaway a week or so, 2 weeks ago. I I got a new Advanced Auto Parts hat, and it's autographed.
There you go. Well, there you go. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to join you, and now I'm going to go make my dog's lives happy by going back to our normal people things and not crazy law all the time.
I'm surprised mine didn't make any noise this whole time. So usually
it might have been bribed accordingly.
She likes to join in somewhere online.
Well, have a good. What day is it? Thursday?
Yes.
Thursday night. All right. Bye-bye.